Alex Pietrangelo is a defenseman in the National Hockey League. What more can you tell us about him?
Well, first of all, credit to Nick. He's the guy who brought it up initially about Pietrangelo and Toronto. And, you know, Nick framed it as, you know, would it be a fit for the Maple Leafs? Would he be someone that they would be interested in for the future? Just in a couple of days, it's funny how it works. It takes somebody to knock it loose, and Nick knocked it loose, and then information starts to dribble out and more things come out, and I think it's people are kind of like, okay, you kind of got it, so here's the rest of it, or as much as we can give you. And I think what happened was when William Nylander was still unsigned and St. Louis was interested in Nylander, they called Toronto and they brought up Alex Pietrangelo as a potential trade chip for Nylander. And it didn't happen, and one of the reasons I think it didn't happen was because Toronto, if they were going to trade Nylander, and it was not their preference, as we all know, but if they were going to trade Nylander, they didn't want it to be for someone who they might not be able to sign in a year, and also somebody who was 6 years older. I think those were kind of the concerns that they had with doing that, plus they wanted to keep him. That said, now that the Nylander thing is done and he's signed, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Toronto will circle back on that. I think they will look at just about every defenseman in the National Hockey League who, A, doesn't have a ton of term, or B, if he does have some term, has a manageable cap hit. And as we know with Toronto, the question is more next year than this. And Alex Pietrangelo has this year and next about $6.5 million. So I do think it's something the Maple Leafs will consider. I also think now it's something that the Blues will consider. The question is going to come down to, is there a fit between the two of them?
The interesting part of all this talk is it's led to so much speculation as to what the Leafs need, even though they're currently second in the Eastern Conference. A lot of that is centered around toughness. Is Pietrangelo the kind of guy that could bring that toughness and solve the blue line? Or do you think that Mike Babcock, Kyle Dubas have said enough times that their toughness is their power play and they're not going to add that before we get to the postseason?
You know, I think Babcock and Dubas probably view it a little differently. It's not unusual for a coach and GM to see the same picture and look at it two different ways. I could see Babcock being in a position where he would want somebody with a bit more edge in his roster, but if you look at Dubas's history, it's not his way to worry about that. You know, someone was telling me the other day, if you look back at Dubas, when he had Sault Ste. Marie in the OHL, they were constantly being talked about that they weren't tough enough. You look at the Marlies in the American Hockey League, there were times they were being talked about not being tough enough. And Dubas basically ignored it. He didn't really do that. He kind of looked at things, as Matthews and Babcock have said, our power play is going to beat you. So I think that generally is his philosophy. I don't think he's necessarily going to go out and say, I need to get a guy just because that guy is an edge. Now, if that guy is edge and can play, I could see him doing that, but he's not going out to get someone that you would call, quote unquote, a meathead, for lack of a better term.
Right.
You know, the other thing, too, is, you know, you mentioned it, they're in second place in the Eastern Conference in the NHL. Who's number one? It's Tampa.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about this is you probably have to play one way to beat Boston and another way to beat Tampa. So you better be able to beat both of them.
Right.
Frege, the Leafs, like a lot of other teams around the league, are going to have RFA issues in the not-too-distant future.
Yeah, they didn't have them.
It's been a long time since the last offer sheet, 2013, Ryan O'Reilly.
Yep.
Based on what your sources are telling you, has the atmosphere changed where we could see one or possibly more over the next 8 months?
I'm like a person predicting a downturn in the housing market, Sid. I've been predicting it for so many years that eventually I'm going to be right. I have believed that we're going to see offer sheets. I think there's a great chance of it this year. There's some really talented players. You've got the list up on the screen right now. I mean, I could see a number of those guys potentially being offer sheet available if they get to that point. And also, I think now with expansion, it makes it even more likely because it's going to be harder to find that many players. The question, it's funny, because Chris Johnson brought it up on the weekend about how if Toronto somehow doesn't sign Austin Matthews before July 1st, he's going to get offer sheeted, and that may very well happen. I could totally see why somebody would do that. One GM made a really interesting point to me, though. He says, if somebody does that to the Maple Leafs, you know they're going to come back at you. And who is going to want the Toronto Maple Leafs wrath, full financial wrath, coming back at them?
Right.
Because you know that the time will come where they're going to get you back. And he said that would be the only reason that he would be concerned about doing it with a team like Toronto, because he knows that it might not be now, but it will eventually happen where they get you in the future.
Last quick one, because I always enjoy your conversations. Not sure if I'm more intrigued by the Andrew Ference conversation or the Milan Lucic conversation.
That was a good conversation,
Since
Freeze,
you
by
can
the way.
listen to
Thanks, guys.
Ference on 31 Thoughts, brought to you by GMC Sierra Denali. We are professional grade. I'll ask you about your conversation with Lucic. Under Hitchcock, does his role change? Does he become a little bit different player? How is he adjusted to Hitchcock?
You know, I think what they're really trying is saying that we don't necessarily want you to be up and down the ice with Connor McDavid and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. That may not be the right fit for you, but maybe on a more heavy line. Like Ken Hitchcock loves heavy hockey. If you talk to anybody about Ken Hitchcock, they'll tell you he loves heavy hockey. And a line of Lucic, Brodziak, and Kassian is exactly the kind of thing he would like. And Lucic has 2 assists in 10 games. It's not like the points have come yet. But one thing you've really noticed, though, Tim and Sid, is that he seems to be more like himself. He's running over people. He's getting into fights. He just seems to have that presence back about him that he always has. And, you know, one of the things that's tough is contracts. Remember, Dale Talon signed Brian Campbell to a big contract in Chicago, and Campbell really struggled with it. And Talon would always say, look, forget the money. It's over. It's out of your control. Just be who you were before you got there. I think that's what they're trying to say to Lucic. We can sit here and say this contract's a disaster. I look at it like, okay, well, you can accept that, or you can say, how can we try to find another way? And I think that's what the Oilers are trying to do. I was really interested in what Lucic said about last year. He was really unhappy in Edmonton. He worked on trying to change his mental outlook. A sports psychologist telling him, stop thinking about the past and start thinking about creating a future. Well, this year didn't really start that well, but now under Hitchcock, it started well for him. All you can do is say, okay, this is what's working. Keep pushing him in that direction. I wonder if the direction is you're not a top 6 forward anymore, but you're a third-line forward who can make a lot of difference and can run over a lot of people. And as Ryan Reeves and Tom Wilson have proven, that is a player who can still be effective in this National Hockey League.
Without a doubt.
Can't teach size. Freed, you cannot teach skill. You just have it. You just have it, sir.
Obviously, you've never seen me play.
Well, seen you do a bunch of other things, and you're really good at those. Thanks, Freed. Appreciate
All
it,
right,
man.
guys, have a great day.
Elliotte Friedman, Hockey Night Canada.